Hi there and welcome to The Monarchy here on Press TV with me, Samson Seas. We're here yet again, of course, to shed some bright light on the dark corners of that island in Western Europe they call the United Kingdom. These are indeed the sort of issues that you would not find on mainstream media networks. It makes you wonder why. Coming up later in the program, we'll be travelling back through time yet again to find out about a backward Islamic sect called Wahhabism. This will be followed by us showing you a terrible truth involving the gassing of innocent people the English, of course, were responsible for. Yes, these topics are shocking enough, as they always are. There is also a special part to the show today, one of my personal preferred subjects, and that is asking you, the people of Britain, about the British system. Is it democratic? If so, how democratic is it? Or even, what is democracy? All this and more, only on The Monarchy, so whatever you do, don't change the channel. Have you ever wondered why the British Prime Minister always bows down to that controversial monarch in Arabia, showing lots of respect every time? Have you ever thought the relationship between the UK government and the ruling family of what they call Saudi Arabia looked somewhat suspicious? And what is Wahhabism? What are the origins of this Islamic sect? Who's behind it? You might have guessed, history does in fact have the answers to all of these questions, and it will lay many of your doubts to rest. This will indeed be another one of our subjects that will include a trip back into the past to see what really went on. Check this out.
What is your name? My name is for my friends. None of my friends is a murderer.
No one can reject the role of the British colonel, fashioned in Hollywood as the Lawrence of Arabia in the Arabs' fight against the Ottoman Empire and the subsequent formation of Wahhabi Saudi Arabia. However, that is not the whole story as far as Britain is concerned, because the Brits were there when the Wahhabi reading of Islam was first founded, even before Saudi Arabia existed. There are accounts, including the memoirs of Mr. همfر, the British spy to the Middle East, that shows the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office created Wahhabism that takes an intolerant view of other interpretations of Islam and other religions. Even if such accounts are not precise, as several commentators have objected, Britain did create Saudi Arabia in collaboration with the Wahhabi Al Saud tribe and did use Wahhabis' intolerance and its old policy of divide and conquer to wage an internal war in the Ottoman Empire, which was the most serious obstacle to London's control over the Middle East until the First World War. Abdul Aziz bin Abdul Rahman Al Saud, who founded the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1932, was a local ruler in the Arabian Peninsula when the Great War began. Following the outbreak of war, the British who were fighting the Ottomans established diplomatic ties with Abdul Aziz, and the two signed the Treaty of Dahrin as early as 1915, which made the lands of the Al Saud family a British protectorate. Abdul Aziz was a descendant of Muhammad Al Saud, who ruled the Najd area of the peninsula in the 18th century, who was a friend of the founder of Wahhabism, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, and who chose Wahhabism for his tribe for the first time. The British followed the treaty with a monthly tribute of £5,000, as well as huge supplies of arms, and helped the would-be king conquer the Central Arabian Peninsula, especially the cities of Hejaz, Mecca and Medina until 1927. London replaced the Treaty of Dahrin with the Treaty of Jeddah on May 20, 1927, that recognized the Saud-held territories' independence, a move that helped Abdul Aziz start the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on September 23, 1932. It was a win-win situation as Britain installed a regime ruled by one of its paid puppets to protect London's interests and used the Al Saud's Wahhabi beliefs to shatter its arch-enemy, the Ottomans, while Abdul Aziz realized Al Saud's long-sought rule over the peninsula. Britain was indeed Abdul Aziz's mentor from the very beginning, and the later Saudi monarch did not hide these ties. The creation of Saudi Arabia was also a victory for Britain, in line with its original designs envisaged in Wahhabi Islam, whose founder was excommunicated by scholars of all other Islamic sects in the 18th century. Britain meant to open a chasm among Muslims to lay hands on the Middle East in line with the policy of divide and conquer, and Wahhabis' extremism was the key to London's ambitions. Indeed, it was initially illegal for a Muslim to wage war on another Muslim, yet Britain needed a new interpretation of Islam that would sanction such fratricide under the guise of jihad. That led to Wahhabism. Britain has kept Saudi Arabia as close as the early 20th century up until now. There are more than 150 joint ventures between British and Saudi companies, and some 30,000 British nationals are living and working in Saudi Arabia, while the Middle Eastern country is Britain's primary trade partner in the region. Britain has been a major arms supplier to Saudi Arabia since the 1960s, which has in turn supplied invaluable oil shipments to the West.
The establishment see these very despotic regimes as key allies in terms of those key economic interests. And
oil and banking.
Oil, banking and arms exports. You know, it was a huge industry in the UK.
Between 2008 and 2009, arms exports to the Middle East region almost doubled, but the vast majority of sales were going to Saudi Arabia and UAE, and they went from 4.9 billion euros to 9.2 billion euros in just 1 year.
The British Foreign Office described UK-Saudi relationship in the 1990s as a house built on two solid pillars, the defence and trade relationships. Under the Al Yamana arms deal, Saudi Arabia exports a daily 600,000 barrels of oil to Britain in exchange for sales that began in 1985, and saw London sell Riyadh 72 Euro fighter jets in August 2006. British arms giant BAE Systems and its predecessor British Aerospace earned £43 billion in 20 years from the contracts.
Generally, the major arms suppliers in the world don't have any qualms about supplying weapons to the most horrendous regimes. It's a ferociously competitive industry, and there are certain countries in the world that are leading the pack and they want to stay on top. It's a very lucrative business. So they will often turn a blind eye to what kinds of weapons are sold, how they are used, whether they're used against civilians. We've seen this not just with the UK, and with the US as well. Both countries were supplying weapons to regimes that were using those weapons against the people. And often those weapons would only be used against the civilian population. They would not be used to invade another country, for instance. This has always been the case, so this is absolutely no surprise.
Saudis have in turn used Western backing, especially from Britain and the US, and the Islamic world's attention to Mecca and Medina to promote their vision of Islam that was initially rejected by almost all Muslim sects in the 18th century. Britain remains one of the chief allies of Saudi Arabia, and the two eye even closer ties.
We must continue to work together to promote common values.
Britain is already slated to clinch another big deal with the Saudis to sell weapons and military equipment worth billions of pounds to the most autocratic regime in the Middle East region.
Parliamentary committees in Westminster over the years have shown a lot of concern about the fact that the UK government has no control over the way the arms exports that we provide for these countries are actually used. Now, when we're providing these arms, what are they being used for?
Politicians themselves know that these countries are very undemocratic. If you look at the Foreign Office's annual human rights report and you look at the countries of concern, and some of the biggest countries of biggest concern are the ones they're selling weapons to. It's quite astonishing.